am I a recycler or death care? At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, we are a precious metal recycler. I am going to recycle your metal. I'm going to tell you what it's worth, and then I'm going to pay you the money. And as long as you're not funding anything illegal, I don't care what you do with it. And I have nothing to do with maintenance. We will buy equipment, one specific piece of equipment, a processor to help a crematory out. Past that, we don't get involved with anything else.
Welcome to the Direct Cremation Podcast with your hosts, Tyler Yamasaki and Will DeMichaelis. All right, today's guest is a staple at every death care conference. Over the years, I've gotten to know him as we make our way through the different states, hotels, and conference centers around the U.S. As the manager for cremation recycling, our guest has become the face of transparency in precious metal recycling and refining in death care. If you can't find him on the floor of your favorite trade show, you'll find him at a big rock concert in the city. If you've dealt it, he'll smelt it. Please welcome our guest, Kevin McKay.
I'm not going to steal that tagline from you, so don't worry about it.
It's free. You can have it.
It's okay. It's yours.
Yeah. So welcome. It's great seeing you at work.
Thank you.
Yeah, almost every other time we've talked, it's been in some random city in a random hotel ballroom or convention hall. So it's glad to see you in your other element.
It's accurately put. Yep.
And before we get into recycling, I want to talk a little bit about you first.
Sure.
The man behind the recycling.
Yeah.
So where did you come from and how did you find yourself in death care?
Well, long story very short, about 21 years ago, I was bartending for a guy because I wanted to rent wave runners on Lake Michigan. And I knew how to bartend, and I knew I'd need to do that at night while I did that during the day. And when that sort of fell through, he said, you'd be really good at sales. And he had just started his own company getting scrap from dental laboratories. And I did that. 6 months later, I was speaking in front of 50 something lab owners in Lubbock, Texas, and the rest is sort of history. I did the dental lab side for years, and then dentist exclusively for years, and then in 2014-15 is when I went exclusively to death care.
Wow. So do you consider yourself death care or more recycling?
Well, I mean, we're definitely the recycling component of death care. Death care is all I focus on anymore. I used to, when I was first starting, it was definitely dental laboratories, which are that's the component that actually makes the prosthetics that goes in the mouth. The dentist just places it. I would work with dentists, jewelers, pawn shops, industrial, you name it. And then the last 6 years, I've gone exclusively to crematories for a number of reasons, but mostly because they really needed the attention and wanted it. Meaning a lot of the other industries I went after didn't place a whole lot of importance, whereas in death care, they definitely do. Partly because it's so new to them that they genuinely need a good understanding of, things to be asking and things to be looking for.
Cool. We'll get into the company itself in depth as we go,
Sure.
But can you give me the 1 minute elevator pitch of cremation recycling?
No, because there isn't one. Well, and I say that because it's pretty involved. And I say that because I've been asked that before. And anybody who can usually goes with, we use the technology that'll get you more money. What else are they going to say, right? It's a car dealer saying we got the best deal. It's a pretty involved process. So I can say in lieu of a 1 minute elevator pitch is if you really want to find out everything you need to know about it, give me about 5 minutes and I can ask you a number of questions to figure out exactly what you at your crematory needs to be able to be the most effective. And I can do that universally with everybody.
Okay. That's a better way to approach it. I like that, Kevin. Yeah. There are a lot of different cremation recycling companies out there. I worked with one when I was at Omega that I liked, but I didn't really do a lot of vetting with the businesses when I chose them. Mostly what I know about them is that you can send them metals and they give you a check. What would you say makes cremation recycling different from that?
Well, I think Tyler touched on it initially, the transparency, and that's a word, that can get thrown out to just try and, make yourself sound great, but then you have to back it up. And, we are very transparent, we not only allow, but we encourage crematory owners to come in and watch their material get melted. And they don't need to be 10 minutes from us. They could be in California. The amount this metal is worth in a lot of cases is at least 5 figures, but in a lot of cases, 6 figures. So it's worth coming at least once. We're 15 minutes from O'Hare Airport. So we always really push that they should walk the floor, establish that we actually, A, have a facility, but B, what does that facility actually look like? But even taking that out of the equation, we have other layers in place, like we offer samples from every melt that we do so they can effectively audit us every time. Our reporting is just night and day compared to what our competitors' reporting is, or I should say, lack of reporting. They intentionally omit a lot of numbers that are very key to sort of being able to determine why that recycler is saying, here's what we paid you. We back it up with information, all of which I realize as I'm telling you that probably doesn't mean much, which going back to the elevator pitch, it's pretty involved and it's difficult to do. But once you get it within about 5-10 minutes, it's pretty simple.
Wow. It seems pretty uncommon to have the kind of open door policy that you have. I know I dealt with a different company based out of Michigan, and they never offered that kind of service to us when working with them.
When was that, Will?
That was 2017, 18.
Well, if they would have offered it to you, you would have been coming here.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you don't, it's because we were doing the work for them.
Yeah.
Got it.
I okay.
So let me expand a little bit.
Yeah,
there is us, and then there are a lot smaller, I'll use the word recycler, in the age of the internet. I'm sure you guys have heard this phrase, click and order replaced brick and mortar. So everybody and their brother could just start up a company that looks fantastic if you have a good enough website, which again is why we really promote, come in, see us.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of, small operations that started because they wanted to do it for themselves, and they have to go to somebody like us. We are essentially the gatekeeper between the end fabricator and the little guys. They got to come through somebody like us first. So at least half of the names that you guys would recognize as recyclers were once clients of ours. And the only reason why they're not anymore is because I started this division here at Mid-States. So,
okay. So the company that we worked with was called Implant Recycling.
Yeah.
Is that one of them?
Sure.
Wow.
So could you maybe give us a lay of the land of like what the different roles are? So you guys are like the end so yeah, maybe you could go through it.
Yeah.
So I'll go from the end to small. So end, so taking the term recycling. So what does that ultimately really mean? Aside from the obvious that we know you take a can and it gets recycled. Well, what does that mean? Well, with these metals, there are fabricators. And by that, these are people who make all the different alloys that the world needs. Intel needs to make, gold fingers on a motherboard. Somebody makes that. Okay. So in order for that somebody to make that, they need to buy or acquire gold, for instance. And it needs to be a specific alloy, which is just a mixture. Okay. So it's essentially, it's a recipe that says 72.3% of this is gold, and then the balance being zinc, copper, silver, you name it. Okay. A fabricator makes that. A fabricator doesn't really have any interest in dealing with a crematory or a dentist or a pawn shop. None of that. They want to deal with somebody like us, who buys massive amounts of that from all these different industries and all these small brokers, melts it, is able to sample and then accurately assay it, which just means to analyze it. We can determine every single one exactly what it is. So then together we can say, we are going to sell you exactly 711.3 ounces of gold, palladium, so on and so on. So they can count on us to provide them with the inventory that they need in order to do what they do, which is make these items, these products that go out into the world. They don't want to deal with every little guy who may have a UPS box to, one furnace and, an X-ray gun. They come to somebody like us. They know during the cash for gold days, we don't deal with the general public, but we did deal with cash for gold stores. We're larger than anything in the pawnbroking industry. During the cash for gold days, we were buying, $15 million worth of gold a week.
Whoa,
So,
wow.
so the volume is pretty staggering.
Right.
These companies want to deal with like 4 of us. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the rest feed into somebody like us. So that's sort of where it happens. It really is as simple as that. They would be wise to deal with somebody like us because we'll give them better terms. They go to somebody big like that so they can deal with the big guy. They're going to be waiting 3 months to get paid.
That's a really good explanation of like how your business makes money and who you deal with.
Yeah.
What about more so internally? Can you tell us about what goes on in the refinery and what that process entails?
Yeah. So here, so we get, and you have experience in this. You saw, little bits of, what we refer to as small or dental metal. It's not just exclusively dental. So we've gotten away from calling it just dental, but picture, a jar of dental metal. And what happens next after it's been checked in, and personally here, we assign it an internal lot number so it can be tracked just like a UPS package could be tracked. It then goes to the smelt department. What we then do there is we add copper to it. And the reason why we add copper is contained in that dental scrap bag there is going to be 20 plus different elements, from gold to palladium to zinc to nickel to chrome, you name it. Some of these metals don't like to sort of work together. So in the melt process, it would really sort of fight each other. So adding copper to it is sort of like a mediator, basically, that sort of brings it all together, right? So when we put that in and we're pouring it, it makes the process a lot quicker and a lot easier to get a homogeneous bar, which is to say it's uniform throughout. We then take a small glass tube that essentially when it's in its molten state, we stick it in and it'll pull out a little bit of metal. That is what we use to assay. That's the next step after it's been melted, is to analyze it. A simple analogy is just like going to the doctor. They take blood. The blood goes to the lab so that the doc doesn't say, I bet your cholesterol level is high. They can take the blood, send it to the lab and say, this is exactly what your cholesterol level is. So that's what we need to do. We need to send that. We have a lab in-house where we have everything assayed so we can determine precisely what the content is. And then based on the weight of the bar after we melt it and the percentages that we get from that lab, we can just simply do the math. So if a bar weighed 10 ounces and it's 20% gold, there's 2 ounces of gold. And these are the numbers that we give to our clients. What did that bar weigh after it was melted? What was the exact percentage of each of the 4 precious metals? And what does that equate to in actual metal? Believe it or not, those 2 key numbers are omitted from every single one of our competitors that are out there. And I know why, but I'm amazed that they do it.
Yeah.
Could you say why or no?
Based on your explanation, I think we should have gotten paid more for our recycled metals.
There's no question you should have in that case. But that just speaks more to their process versus
100%
ours and others, that it was sort of muddled with, points and, maintenance and things like that, which we are, back to your question, Tyler, am I a recycler or death care? At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, we are a precious metal recycler. Mm-hmm. I am going to recycle your metal. I'm going to tell you what it's worth, and then I'm going to pay you the money. And as long as you're not funding anything illegal, I don't care what you do with it. And I have nothing to do with maintenance. We will buy equipment, one specific piece of equipment, a processor to help a crematory out. Past that, we don't get involved with anything else. So
got it. So you're not taking the catalytic converter that got stolen off my car the other day.
Well, we don't, because we don't deal with the general public. We're aware of that, and to that point, we have an anti-money laundering program within the company that we do have the responsibility if somebody is stealing, whether it's catalytic converters or getting gold in from countries they shouldn't be, we can't take it. So, we will get calls, you guys get the email. We all get the email of, the prince from Nairobi who wants to, just needs your bank account information to send you $30 million. We get calls from people who, who are you? Why do you have 500 ounces of platinum? That doesn't make any sense. What is it? This doesn't line up. So
is the cash for gold boom still around, or has that dwindled pretty significantly?
Thankfully, no, it's not. It really had legs for about, I would say, 09 to 12, maybe 13. And then most people sold all their extra gold. And I think that really was the contributing factor to its demise. But it was also oversaturated. I mean, every other store, whether it was a gas station that went out of business or, your dry cleaner, everybody was buying gold.
Yeah.
And nobody was paying even remotely close to fair value for it.
I understand gold's value, but I saw on your website that you process pacemakers.
Yeah.
I had not seen that before. What is recoverable on a pacemaker, if anything, or what do you do with pacemakers specifically?
So pacemakers are tough. There's a couple different ways to approach this. One is, you have the actual pacemaker, and then you've got, let's just say, about 18 inches of wire. And the last, we'll say about 4 to 6 inches that connects to the heart is almost always a platinum iridium alloy, because iridium is also a platinum group metal. They're highly conductive. They're very resistant to heat, and they don't tarnish. Nobody's allergic to them really, so they're great. And that's what's actually connected to the heart. The rest of that is, I believe, a tungsten wire, which is junk in terms of metal. That wire typically stays in the body, so we see it. Meaning, as a funeral director, you would typically cut from the actual unit, take the unit out. All that wire is still left in there, goes to the cremation. It's sitting there waiting for us to recover it, which we do. The unit itself, these are designed to work once, really.
Yeah.
Or they're designed to not be opened. There are toxic chemicals in there with the battery that if they leached, that would kill the person that had it in them. So they're very difficult to split open. So even if there is some value in there, like tantalum or platinum or palladium in there, it's almost cost prohibitive to try to get it out. So what we found, the best way to go about it is work with a non-for-profit out of the University of Michigan called My Heart, Your Heart, which does their best to try and refurbish as many as they can. And then in a sort of Doctors Without Borders effort, they go to third world countries and place them with people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to get one. So,
wow. Oh,
and
cool.
other than that, they can go back to the manufacturer, like a Boston Scientific, and they'll do some, R&D on it.
Yeah. That's what I'm most familiar with, is returning it to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And just for, data purposes, really.
Yep.
I'm curious, what courier do you use to transport your containers to and from crematories?
So we use FedEx and UPS.
Okay.
We work with Brinks and another that's escaping me right now for metal that we send out to fabricators. Like I said, so, these are the carriers that exceed FedEx and UPS's liability capabilities. So, at any given time, it could be sending, millions and millions of dollars worth of metal at a time. But UPS and FedEx, we have a great relationship with, and we have third-party insurance.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Because UPS and FedEx only go so far.
Yeah. The company we used UPS, but I encountered some issues personally in dealing with that just on an operational basis. Have you had any, or can you speak to any issues that couriers run into when they're picking up these metals, or common issues that you had to solve and how you solve them with just getting the right thing picked up at the right time? You'd
be amazed that a 11-gallon drum weighing upwards of 100 pounds can just go lost at a FedEx hub. And it does. If it was an overnight letter, I could totally see it. But to answer your question, yeah, we've encountered it, which is why we insure everything. It fortunately doesn't happen often. It most commonly results in a very extended delay in us getting it. And I can really remember on one hand how many have just never shown up again. And thankfully we insure it, as I said. But, and yes, the other part is, we'll have a location that will occasionally need to call us 2, even 3 times, because the FedEx driver doesn't want to go out and pick up a 75 or 100 pound drum, which, I can't blame them, but I totally can, because that's their job. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what it is, I mean, so
That's me. I'm that guy.
who doesn't want to pick that up?
I'm the guy who picks it up for the guy who doesn't want to pick it up, and
I
just to
got you.
get this thing out of my crematory.
Our driver, who we love, our FedEx driver, his name is Jesse, we'll throw him over like a bouncer throws a keg of beer over his shoulder in a college town, so
Yeah.
we look at that guy and say, if every FedEx driver was this guy, we'd be fine. But
Yeah,
FedEx puts, and so does UPS, 150-pound threshold, which I don't even know that I want to pick up 150-pound anything.
No.
But amazingly they do. So
yeah. For funeral directors who are maybe hesitant to use like recycle metalling services, how do you coach them to approach the subject with clients so that maybe you can ease their concerns? Have you had to deal with that before? And
By clients, you mean families, right?
by clients, I mean families, because they sometimes question what's in the cremation authorization and what's actually happening to their loved ones' metals, or are you pawning them, or you get all sorts of weird questions. So I'm curious to see if you've been approached with that question and how you coach people at funeral homes to talk to families.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. In fact, we worked with Chris Farmer at the Farmer law firm years ago, and he authored 3 options for a funeral home to just copy and paste and put into their disclosure, which effectively says, this is what we do with it. And talking to a funeral home to say, first they have to understand it in order for them to convey that to their family. And it's, listen, you really have 2 options. One of which, and I never say this, and I always tell them, I'm not saying this to scare you, because there's probably very little teeth in this regulation, but they are actually mandated to properly recycle this metal, because there are 2 options. One, it goes in the garbage, which means it's going to end up in a landfill. And these are heavy metals, which are not easily biodegradable. So they're just going to sit in a landfill. The alternative to that is to recycle it, which it gets melted and gets put back into the workforce. So even the rightest of right conservative, who is very fiscally conscious, has to realize at some point you're not hugging a tree just because you're taking metal and recycling it. It costs less than having to mine more or make more. Take the existing and just melt it. It makes better business sense. So from that perspective, as a funeral director, they need to understand that this is just the better of the 2 options to recycle it. But expressing that to family is, listen, we are actually required to do the right thing, which in this case is to recycle it as opposed to allowing this to end up in a landfill. I often tell them, listen, get out in front of this and tell people, because you've partnered with an EPA permitted recycling facility who actually goes through the steps of not only properly recycling it, but establishing the value and paying us the value. Yeah, last year we generated, $25,000. And what we did with it was we gave to this food bank, and we gave to this hospice, and we gave to, this battered women's shelter. Here's how we allocated these funds, in most cases within the community. So if the funeral director is not doing any of those things and just, putting it into the business, that's certainly their business, and they can do what they like with it, actually. So I think, the more information you give, the more comfortable their families are going to feel about it, is my opinion. But I'm also the one who says, come in our door, take a sample, look at this paperwork, check me anytime you want, So the more honest you are, the less you have to sort of remember or sort of, cover your tracks. So,
yeah. One follow-up on the designating a charity, or what benefits? I mean, I'm sure that has benefits to the funeral home as well, in its own way as a tax asset. Right. So
and I'm not an accountant, and I've looked at this a little bit initially in what was better. Should, we'll just take $10,000 as a for instance, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, but they can ask an accountant. If you take 10 grand and you deposit that into your account, and then also offset that by cutting a $10,000 check to a charity, I don't think that it's a total wash. I
Okay.
still think you're paying a higher tax on income than you are getting as a benefit from cutting a check. So what we do in a lot of cases is we just cut the check for them, and then it's on behalf of that funeral home. So
Okay.
at the end of the day, I tell people, use this as an extension of your marketing budget. Okay.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing it locally, because you're going to want to advertise on, little Jimmy's, baseball jersey. You're going to want to advertise in the church. You're going to want to advertise all over town. Just do it by way of giving money to foundations and great causes in your community, and you're going to get the recognition that way.
Smart.
And you don't have any tax implications. And believe me, our accountants, and if you know any accountants, they are very much black and white. They tend to follow the letter of the law, and ours have said, listen, they're not skirting any tax laws or codes here by having us cut the check for them.
Cool. Great. Yeah.
So given a traditional like barrel that you receive from a funeral home, what does that metal breakdown look like on average? Like what kinds of metals are coming through, and how much can maybe a barrel net you as a funeral home?
So I'll answer it a different way, but I'll tell you the metals that are generally speaking found in every one of them. And we're just going to assume the crematory is recovering as much of the dental metal as they can. And the reason why that's hard sometimes is because it's very small. A hip or a knee is very obvious. It's sitting right there. You can pluck it out. You throw that in the drum. Hips and knees are, generally speaking, they're going to be either F75, which is a chrome cobalt moly alloy, or they're going to be titanium. And then we have some, brackets. If you're broken a collarbone or needed something in a wrist or something like that, that's made out of a stainless steel. So this is typically what we get. We'll get some zinc from, the casket hardware, brass, of course, this kind of stuff. And then the dental is going to be primarily precious. I shouldn't say primarily precious. It's going to be a lot of precious metal, which would be gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And then from there, there'll be some non-precious alternative dental prosthetics, which will be chrome, cobalt, nickel, zinc, typically. So those are the metals that we encounter. We have two different types. We have the small metals, which is what we're going to process on our own. We have the non-precious metals that the outlets that we have reached out to would rather we didn't even melt it and we left it in that form, because they want to be able to see, we know exactly what this is. We're going to remelt this back into exactly that ingot, leave it alone, and it's easier for them to sort of analyze. But to the last part of your question that you asked, which is what's the value? I typically approach a crematory, and the first question I ask them is, what is their volume? So if a crematory tells me they do 1,000 cremations, my follow-up to that is, how many of those, if any, would you consider to be low income? So this is not working class. This is below working class, county cases, indigent. And if the answer, for instance, is 20%, I would say as far as it relates to recycling, their volume is really 800, not 1,000, because we take out that 20% that likely didn't have good dental work in their life. That 800 volume should be about a $50 per cremation baseline is what we say. This is not an average so much or exactly what they will get. This is where their expectations reasonably should be. We have crematories that get well over $100 per cremation, and we have crematories that struggle to get 10.
So that's per cremation you could expect.
So that 800,
The 800 is like $40,000.
that 800 volume easily gets 40K a year.
Wow. So it's
Son of a biscuit eating bulldog.
Yeah.
Oh, that was actually way more than I was expecting.
Yeah. So maybe just ballpark it for me if you were doing 4,000 cremations a year.
The higher you get in volume, I have found in some cases it's because you've gotten some county contracts where you're doing, a ton. But let's say you're doing 4,000 and you're just a great trade crematory with a lot of really solid funeral homes. Easily could be getting $250,000 a year.
Wow.
Which is fantastic.
Okay.
It's
fantastic.
I will tell you, so many of the crematories that we work with don't want anything to do with the money, so to speak.
Yeah.
They don't want the money, and they think of ways. And we work with some large ones that have started internally at their company, essentially a committee or a foundation to figure out how are we going to spend this money? Meaning, what charities are we giving to now and how much?
Yeah,
And
because that's a
it's
significant amount of money.
huge.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that's not $1,000 a month. That's
a lot.
real significant. Yeah.
So this speaks to why are there 8 recyclers at the Cana meeting?
Right.
There's a decent amount of money to go around.
There's a lot there. And then this also speaks to, what you were saying, Will, is that there was such a devoid of information on there because the less you know, what you don't know, you don't know. So if you don't know to ask, hey, how much did it weigh when it was melted? And are you sure this was only 2% gold? I usually get about 8% gold, for instance. Because we have all that information, we can bring up to the funeral home owner, hey, you might have a problem, meaning Joe, the operator, might be taking something. Nobody knows what palladium is. Everybody knows what gold is. Yeah. And it's a telltale sign when it's, 0.5% gold and 9% palladium. Palladium's worth more than gold, but they don't know what it is. So you can spot gold. So I can say somebody's plucking gold out of this because this doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
So if we come and visit your facility, are you going to let us into the safe with all the bars just stacked up underneath?
I will certainly let you see it. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Sounds good. It's going to be like the movies with all the gold bars just stacked up. And
yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah.
All right.
There are, we have safe rooms here. But I whenever I'm giving a tour, typically to a big group, we have what is called shot, which is what is made into just tiny little BBs, what jewelers use, so they can very accurately pour in exactly how much gold they want to then mix to make their carat. And you can hold a bottle that's, about that big, and it can about 100 ounces. You can have, in your hands, $250,000 at one point. So,
oh, wow.
So it's pretty crazy. So it's not so much the rooms of the gold bars. We're not Fort Knox, but gold and palladium is worth a ton in very small amounts. So it doesn't take a lot to have significant value.
Do you guys don't separate them, or do you guys sell the bars with the copper? So is everything mixed, or you actually separate them out too?
No. So this is a great question, and I like that you asked it because I've heard from some funeral directors who are clients of ours or who just asked this question because they're going through the process of picking somebody, and they said, so-and-so's argument was they're really a refiner and you're not. We do refine, and I'm not even going to bore you in getting into why we do. It's a process that we go through for some of our other clients where we technically have to just break it down to its purity. Not necessary in virtually every other case. And the reason why is with proper assaying techniques, you can determine exactly what, this bar of metal contains. Past that, if I report that number to a funeral home or a dentist or a pawn shop, breaking it down to its purity doesn't do any good after that. That's all that needs to be done is to analyze what that is. So we can then sell that off to that fabricator. They are going to purify it one way or the other, because they need to get it to what is referred to as 4 or 5 nines purity, which is 99.99. They need to do that anyway. So there's no need for us to do that. A. B, that step is just totally unnecessary as it relates to anyone we deal with, whether that's a crematory, a dentist, a broker, a jeweler, a pawn shop. And I've often said, any of our competitors who say that, number one, no, they're not refining. And number two, more importantly, it's sort of like the little dog that barks all day but has no bite. It's they're reaching for anything they can say to try and better them and sort of divert your attention. Refining sounds as if you're more efficient, when really you're diverting away from, well, why don't you let me in your door? Why don't you report these numbers? And why don't you give me a sample from every melt that we do so I can verify the numbers that you're giving me?
Got it. Okay. So I'm not going to see a bunch of shiny new gold bars and palladium bars in your office.
We do actually refine some metal.
Okay.
In fact, on most days, if you guys were here, I would take you back to our diamond recovery lab, where they are actually separating stones from the settings that they were in, so that somebody doesn't have to literally pick out every stone. You're probably going to damage them, and it would just be really arduous and tedious. But we have a process that actually separates them. And then what we're left with is essentially this sludge that is pure gold. And it looks like coffee grounds / sand. And you would walk right by it and not even know you're looking at 20 ounces of pure gold.
So cool.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm actually like really interested in the science stuff behind this.
Yeah.
But what is the most unique metal like you've gotten from a crematory? Where you're like, this shouldn't necessarily have been here, or you don't see this that often. Can you think of a time when you got a metal and the assay came back and you're like, why is this here?
No, because it doesn't. No.
That's good. That's a good thing.
So when I first tell people what I do for a living, it's first, it's an array of, reactions. But, one of which is, where's the metal? And then you can say, knees, hips, things like that, oh yeah. And then of course, dental, what's in dental? Gold and palladium. These were really the two metals that were primarily used, with some silver, very little bit of platinum. And then once you move away from precious, you get to just non-precious alternatives to that. So it's always basically the same set of metals. You're never going to get like rhodium, for instance, because it was just never used. And rhodium's worth about $14,000 an ounce, right now. So
okay,
$200,000 a pound. Yeah, so it's just never used, so we don't find it.
Got it. Okay, very interesting. So I want to get out of cremation recycling
Sure.
a little bit. Talk to you. You actually seem to have a lot of fun at shows. And for those that didn't know, when you're traveling a lot and going to numerous conventions and death care shows, the convention circuit is a really unique experience. I don't know, sometimes pretty grueling. How many shows a year do you think you attend?
Probably 15 to 20.
Wow.
That can range from, like, next week I'll go to the FSCA meeting in Wisconsin, which is a great group of, I'm going to say it anyway, but sort of defectors from the Wisconsin Funeral Directors Association. This is their sort of own group of, cemetery, crematory, funeral home owners. And it's a great group. In fact, it was the first one that we ever went to. Mark Krause, who I'm sure you know that name, has long been the president of. They're a great group, and it travels from, next week it's in Wisconsin Dells, it's in Green Bay, Milwaukee, you name it. And that's a quick, 2-day meeting. I'll speak for an hour on Wednesday, to NFDA 2 weeks, last week, which is, the massive show, that travels all over the country too. So they can be small to big. And listen, I mean, our marketing partner is MKJ. And if you know anything about them, and I will say it, they're not cheap, but you get what you pay for, in my opinion. And, they have their ski summit, their sea summit, and then they're introducing this new meeting this year coming up in a few weeks at the Montage in Bluffton, South Carolina. So in January, I'll be at the, Ritz-Carlton in Beaver Creek. And then after that, I'll be in the Ritz-Carlton in Naples, Florida. So it's not always that bad. It's pretty nice sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good lineup. Yeah.
I think the etiquette of boothing is pretty hilarious. Like, normally if you and I were having a conversation and someone walks up to us, right, we can end our conversation naturally or somehow integrate that third person. But then when you're boothing, it's completely okay for me and you to be talking and someone comes up to your booth and I just like literally just stop talking and walk away and you start talking to that person. I don't know. I think it's super funny because there's like this understood etiquette that vendors have when they go to these booths. Right. And I see you. I mean, that's naturally where I see you. So I know we've had like numerous conversations that just end midway through and I have to walk away.
Right. A day later, you'll say, so what else? What other bands were you talking about? Right. It's you have to pick up very unnaturally, where you left off. And it is weird. It's a different dynamic that's unique to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took me a while to pick that up. But now that I go to more shows, it's like very understood that I'm going to talk to you and there's, can't get too deep because we may have to pick it up later.
Correct. Yeah. Keep the deep stuff to the bar later,
Yeah.
The best strategy.
But yeah, that's where I'll usually be. You got to have fun, right? You got to enjoy yourself. So
yeah, you really do seem to enjoy it. Whether it's like hitting some of the casinos that we go to, or usually you almost always seem to find a concert where a band that you like is playing in that city. Like I don't know how you do it. It seems like there's always a concert.
I've gotten weirdly lucky over the years that it happens to line up, and so yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to see, hey, if I got to go there, who's playing, and
Yeah.
they could be an absolute favorite to, yeah, I'll check them out,
Yeah, normally I try to just get in and out as possible, but you
But if you
enjoy
gotta be
the
there
time.
for 3-4 days, see what's up.
True.
And I'm in sales, so I have to, sort of by virtue of what I do for a living, I have to engage with people, and it's nice when you can get past the, oh, hey, how are you, into, so where'd you grow up? What are you into? What do you do? Oh, you play hockey too. Oh, you're big into whiskey. You can get into so much if you just allow yourself to kind of engage with people, and then it becomes a lot more fun.
What's your top city you've been to?
I really like Park City, Utah, and was there this time last year. That's a really cool town. I've grown to like the Carolinas. I was in Asheville, North Carolina about a month ago. That seems like a pretty cool town. One of my favorite bands was playing there like 5 days later. So talk about lining up. It did not quite line up, but so Asheville, North Carolina was great. Park City, Utah, no doubt about it. And I always love San Diego. It's just when you live in Chicago, which is a great town. San Diego is just sort of, checks that box of everything. Big city, gorgeous weather all the time, and just a pretty cool vibe, pretty much.
Yeah, I kind of wish the funeral shows would come out to the West Coast a little more. Selfishly,
I don't know why they don't. Yeah,
I think it's turnout wise. I don't think a lot of those guys on the East Coast want to come west that often. I think Vegas is as far west as they're willing to go.
LA, San Fran, or San Diego is 6 hours from anybody on the East Coast.
Yes,
you could get to Ireland from Chicago in 6 hours. So I mean, it's one or the other.
But us being over on the West Coast, I'm quite aware of how long it takes because we always have to go east, and the time zone change is intense. But
you come to them.
Yeah, exactly.
For now, at least.
Right.
So we have a question that we've asked all of our guests thus far, Kevin, and we want your input or your take on it. When I'm pretty interested to see how you answer this question, because you come at cremation and death care from like a tangential business. Mm-hmm. What do you think death care looks like in 10 years?
Well, I think it's largely cremation. I think it is already on the path to being less personal, just with direct cremation. And if you look at any of the big guys, or really specifically the two, and I can't really speak that eloquently about it, but, Foundation Partners and SCI both have really big presences with direct cremation. So this is, kudos to them for responding the way the consumer has sort of told them they want, right? I mean, Blockbuster closed because Netflix took over, and Borders closed, and amazingly Barnes & Noble still open because Amazon became Amazon. So if this is what people want, and then as religion starts to sort of go by the way of not as structured, in most communities, you're going to get less of having this old traditional way of sort of celebrating life, and people are going to start doing it in their own way, and they already have. So I think to answer it, shortly, it's going to be largely cremation. 10 years, 70-75% cremation probably, with at least a third of it, maybe half of it direct.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think it's a pretty safe answer. Not safe, but like a pretty predictable answer, I think.
Yeah. I mean, beyond that, I don't know. I can tell you people are still going to die.
Yeah.
So what they're going to do after that, or what their families are going to do after that is, how do they handle that? And it's cremation. Mm-hmm. So, which is great for me. I mean, this is...
Yeah, of course.
I feel like we're positioned pretty well for what the future holds.
Because there's $0 in cremation recycling for burials, right?
Yeah, we do nothing in that sector at all.
Yeah.
Or pets. Yeah, nothing. So,
Or pets.
yeah.
Is that just because pets don't have any metals, right?
Which weirdly, and like not weirdly, but the lengths that people go with their pets, that you would have thought somebody's dog would have had a gold prosthetic in their mouth at some point in time, but no, they just yank it. Yeah.
Got it.
So no, there's none of that in pets.
Start a new business, implanting
dogs with.
I'll wait for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so cool. So is there anything else you want to speak to on cremation recycling or anything?
No, I think you guys asked some really good questions, and I appreciate that, and it gives me sort of the platform to kind of preach, and I could go into greater length on, but at the risk of bashing my competition any more than I might already have. But there's a lot more to it. To your point, Will, where you said, "Hey, I don't know, we had stuff, we got rid of it, we got something, and then that was that. That's good enough, right?" No, not even close. But most people don't know to ask more.
Yeah.
So people should ask more questions. That's the long and short of it. And don't ask one person, ask multiple.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Good advice.
Let's say people are so moved by this conversation and they want to reach out to you. How can people reach you or your company? What's the best way? Do you want to leave some socials and stuff?
Sure. So Cremation Recycling, pretty easy to remember, is our website. So cremationrecycling.com. I'm McKay at cremationrecycling.com. Those are the two best ways that, people can find us. The website's great because there's some really good videos on there. There's real good sort of step-by-step, like we talked about, it comes in, then how do you get a bar and tell me how much it's worth. So all that's on there. Somebody can be on our site for a half hour before they even, are compelled to actually pick up the phone and call me or email me. So there's good stuff on there.
I thought the 10-step process thing that you guys have was really informative and really clear in what you do. And I was able to understand a lot of it. So definitely worth checking out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also you can see a video of you.
Yeah, there's no shortage of videos of me on there. Not that
Definitely not.
I am the face of it. That is, not just the fun guy who's having a lot of fun at the shows, but I am the face of this company. So there's a lot of me on there. Yeah.
Yep. Quite a bit. Definitely worth checking out.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I don't have anything else. Will, you good?
Yeah, it was great talking to you, Kevin. Really appreciate your insight and information. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate this as well. And anytime you guys want to dig deeper into it, let me know, and I'd be happy to come back on. And congrats! I'm so thrilled and honored to be the first video on your guys' podcast. So
yeah, we had to have a handsome face to go with it.
Yeah, to start us off on the right
foot.
Me, exactly.
So.
Yeah, but you'll do. So
you'll do just fine. Yeah,
it's just fine.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
This is the Direct Cremation Podcast with Will and Tyler. Thank you.
Thanks guys.
Everybody. See ya.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you ever want to know more, please find us at directcremation.com.